Not loud. Not smiling. Just dropped between two sentences like a pen slipping from her hand. Mera husband banjo. I laughed too quickly. The kind of laugh you use to cover confusion. She didn't look up from the papers on her desk, just slid them toward me like she hadn't just tilted the room off its balance. A second later she added, calm, professional, almost bored, temporarily. Sit down. That was the moment. Not when she said it. But when I realized my hands were shaking and she'd already moved on. I work at a small electronics repair shop attached to a corporate office building. Most of my day is cracked screens, loose wires, customers who swear the phone just stopped working. Her office is upstairs. Glass walls. Quiet. Everyone there smells like coffee and confidence. She's my boss's boss. Mid-40s, maybe older. Hair always tied back like she doesn't have time for it to fall. I'd seen her before. Everyone had. She walks like she's late even when she's not. People straighten up when she passes. She doesn't flirt. She doesn't linger. When she talks, it's precise, no extra words, no wasted emotion. That's what made it worse. That day, she came down because her laptop wouldn't turn on. I opened it on the counter, asked the usual questions. She watched my hands instead of my face. When I fixed it, she said thank you without smiling. Then paused. Just long enough to make the air feel thick. What's your name? I told her. She repeated it, slower. Like she was testing how it sounded. Later that afternoon, her assistant called me upstairs. That never happens. Her office was too clean, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. She motioned for me to sit. I didn't know where to put my hands. On my knees felt childish. On the armrest felt like I was pretending to belong. She explained it like a business problem. A family event. Questions she didn't want to answer. A few days. Appearances. No complications. She spoke too much, actually. Over-explained. Then stopped, abruptly, like she'd said more than intended. I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe because saying no felt louder than saying yes. There was a pause after that. Not awkward in the obvious way. More like unfinished. Her fingers tightened around a pen. She noticed. Let go. I noticed that too. Of course, she said, softer now. You can refuse. I opened my mouth. Closed it. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I didn't check it. I kept looking at the small crease between her eyebrows, the one that only shows when she's tired. I'll think about it, I said. She smiled then. Not warm. Relieved. As I stood to leave, she reached out without looking and adjusted my ID badge. Just straightened it. Her fingers brushed my chest for half a second. No apology. No explanation. She stepped back like it hadn't happened. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd left something behind. Or picked something up. I couldn't tell which. That night, I replayed the moment again and again, not the words, not the offer, but the way she avoided my eyes right after touching me. Like that was the part she couldn't afford to explain. Her assistant came down near closing, shoes in hand, voice low like she was already apologizing. She needs the projector fixed. Tonight. No title. No name. Just she. I wiped my hands on a rag and followed. The office floor was darker this time. Only her cabin lights were on. From the hallway, I could see her standing by the window, phone pressed to her ear, shoulders stiff like she was holding herself upright by force. She didn't turn when I entered. She just lifted a finger. Wait. I set the projector on the table and pretended to check wires. Her voice softened on the call, then sharpened again. A pause. A long one. No, she said finally. I won't change my mind. She hung up and stood there for a second longer than necessary. When she turned, her face rearranged itself. Professional. Contained. Sorry, she said. You can start. I nodded and got to work. The room was too quiet. Every small sound felt amplified, the click of my tools, the hum of the air conditioner, the faint crack in her voice when she cleared her throat. She hovered instead of sitting. Arms crossed, then uncrossed. Her hands kept finding each other, fingers lacing and unlacing like they didn't know what to do when she wasn't speaking. I noticed how thin her wrists were. How the veins showed when she clenched them. You don't have to stay, she said suddenly. It can wait till morning. It's fine, I replied. Too fast. She watched me then. Not the equipment, me. Like she was trying to place me somewhere in her mental order of things and failing. While I adjusted the lens, she moved closer to see the screen. Her perfume was faint. Clean. Not sweet. I felt it before I registered how close she was. When the image finally sharpened, I exhaled without realizing I'd been holding my breath. Thank you, she said. And then, quieter, I've been very tired lately. It wasn't a complaint. Or an invitation. Just a fact she hadn't dressed up. I straightened, wiped my hands again even though they weren't dirty. You work a lot. She gave a short laugh. It slipped out before she could stop it. Not the one she uses in meetings. This one faded almost immediately, like she'd revealed something by accident. Yes, she said. That's one way to say it. There was a chair behind her. She didn't take it. She leaned against the table instead, palms flat, shoulders slumping just a little. I wondered who she leaned like that with when no one was watching. I thought about what you said, I told her, hating how careful my voice sounded. Her head snapped up. For a second, she looked unsure. Then she masked it, eyes dropping to the floor. You don't need to answer now, she said. Or ever. The projector hummed to life between us. Light filled the wall. Neither of us moved. When I reached past her to turn it off, our hands touched again. This time, she didn't pull away immediately. Just long enough for me to notice her fingers were cold. It started raining while we were still pretending this was about work. Not heavy rain. The kind that settles in, patient, tapping the windows like it has nowhere else to be. The power flickered once, then steadied. She frowned at the ceiling, checked her phone, then set it face down on the table like she didn't want it interrupting whatever this was becoming. I asked you to stay because, she began, then stopped. Pressed her lips together. The files didn't sync. IT is useless. I nodded even though the laptop was already open and syncing fine. I could have said that. I didn't. We sat on opposite sides of the small meeting table. Too close to ignore each other, too far to explain the tension honestly. The overhead lights were off, only the desk lamp was on, throwing shadows that made the room feel smaller. More private than it should have been. She loosened her hair tie and let her hair fall. I looked away too late. She noticed. Noticed everything, always. You're very quiet today, she said. So are you. A beat. Then a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm choosing my words, she replied. That usually means I'm about to say the wrong thing. Thunder rolled, distant. She flinched. It was small, but it cracked something open. She rubbed her temple with 2 fingers like she had a headache she didn't want to admit to. My sister called earlier, she said suddenly. About the wedding. I waited. She asked if I was bringing anyone. Her laugh this time didn't hide fast enough. I said no. Then she said, never mind. She reached for her glass of water, realized it was empty, set it back down untouched. Her hands trembled. Just enough. You don't have to talk about it, I said. I know. She paused. But I don't talk about things. That's the problem. Her phone buzzed on the table. She didn't look at it. It buzzed again. Longer this time. I recognized the name when it lit up. I wish I hadn't. She turned the phone face down harder than necessary. Sorry. It's okay. No, she said. It's not. The rain picked up. The building made soft, settling noises around us. I became very aware of how late it was. Of how if anyone walked in, this would look wrong even if nothing had happened. She stood and moved toward the window, crossed her arms like she was cold. I stayed seated. It felt safer that way. I shouldn't have asked you, she said quietly. About that day. I swallowed. You didn't force me. She turned. Looked at me properly. Her eyes were tired. Honest in a way I hadn't seen before. That doesn't make it fair. Silence stretched. Something sat between us, heavy and unnamed. I stood then, slowly, like I might scare it off. She didn't step back. We were close enough now that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Close enough to smell the rain on her clothes. My hand lifted without permission, stopped inches from her arm. She closed her eyes. And my phone rang. I didn't answer the call. The screen kept lighting up in my pocket, vibrating against my thigh like a warning I was choosing to ignore. When it finally stopped, the silence felt heavier than the ringing had. She opened her eyes. For a moment, neither of us moved. My hand was still suspended between us, useless now. I let it fall back to my side like it didn't belong to me. This can't keep happening, she said. Not sharp. Not angry. Just tired. Like she'd reached the end of an argument she'd been having with herself for a long time. I nodded, even though she hadn't asked a question. You don't even know what's happening, I said. Neither do I. She exhaled slowly, walked back to the table, and sat. The chair creaked under her weight. She folded her hands in her lap, then unfolded them again. Her eyes stayed on the surface of the table, tracing scratches that had probably been there for years. I notice everything, she said quietly. That's my problem. I notice when you stay longer than necessary. When you pretend the work takes more time. When you stop yourself from looking at me. I swallowed. She looked up then, and the honesty in her face felt almost intrusive. And I notice, she continued, that I don't stop it. The rain outside softened, like it was listening. I didn't mean for this to feel, she searched for the word and failed. Her mouth tightened. This heavy. It doesn't feel light to me, I said. A faint, sad smile crossed her face. That's what scares me. I leaned against the table, keeping distance I didn't trust myself to manage otherwise. Then why keep me around? She laughed once. It broke immediately. Because you see me when I'm not performing, she said. And I'm not used to that. The room went very still. I'm not asking for anything, she added quickly. I'm not offering anything either. Her voice wavered, and she stopped. Cleared her throat. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither did I. I wanted to tell her that. Instead, I said, "You're allowed to be confused." She closed her eyes again. When she opened them, they were glassy but dry. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Not like this. You're young. You should want uncomplicated things." I didn't respond. The truth sat on my tongue, sharp and irresponsible. She stood and walked toward the door. Stopped with her hand on the handle. Didn't turn around. "If you stay," she said, almost to herself, "I won't know how to pretend this didn't matter." And I realized that for the first time, walking away would hurt less than staying. The shift didn't come with a confession. It came with a mistake. She called me the next morning and left a voicemail she didn't mean for me to hear. I knew that immediately, by the way her voice sounded unfinished, like she thought she'd already hung up. Papers rustled. A sigh. Then, softer than before, "I can't keep doing this. He doesn't even know why I'm like this." A pause. Breathing. "You remind me of him," she said. And I hate that I noticed. The call ended abruptly. I stood in the repair shop with a phone in my hand that suddenly felt heavier than any tool I owned. The world kept moving around me, customers, printers, the bell at the door, but something inside me tipped, slow and irreversible. That evening, I didn't go upstairs. I didn't invent an excuse. I didn't linger. She came down instead. Not polished. No jacket. Hair loose again, like the night before. She stopped when she saw me, like she hadn't expected me to still be there. Like she'd hoped I wouldn't be. "You heard it," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. My throat felt tight, useless. "I didn't mean to." "I know." She looked past me, then back. I deleted it. Too late. We stood there, the space between us suddenly full of something fragile. She leaned against the counter, fingertips resting on the edge like she needed the contact. "He was younger too," she said after a while. "Not much. Enough to matter." I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. "I was married," she continued. "Careful. Responsible. And still, somehow, I wasn't." Her mouth curved into something that almost resembled a smile. "He saw me when I was falling apart. Then he left. Or I did. It depends which version I'm telling myself that day." I watched her hands as she spoke. They were steady now. Too steady. "I promised myself I wouldn't let that happen again," she said. No blurred lines. No confusion. "And then?" I asked quietly. "And then you started fixing things," she replied. And looking at me like I wasn't a role. Silence settled between us, not awkward, just dense. "I'm not him," I said. "I know." She finally met my eyes. "That's what makes it worse." She straightened, already pulling herself back together. "The practiced version. The one everyone else got." "I'm going to create distance," she said. "That's the right thing." I nodded, because arguing would have been selfish. She turned to leave, then stopped. Looked back once, like she was checking if I was real. "I'm sorry," she said. "For letting you in at all." She walked away before I could answer. That night, I didn't replay her touch. I replayed her voice, saying my presence had cracked open something she'd sealed years ago. Distance lasted 12 days. Not because either of us counted. Because routine has a way of revealing absence. Her assistant stopped calling. Other technicians went upstairs. I stayed downstairs and told myself that was maturity. That was respect. That was me doing the right thing. It didn't feel like anything noble. It felt like holding my breath without knowing when to exhale. On the 13th day, she came down near closing again. Different time. Same pause at the doorway. She looked smaller somehow. Not weaker, just less armored. She didn't speak right away. Let the bell on the counter finish ringing from the last customer who'd left. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I nodded. I always did. We didn't go upstairs. She followed me to the back room where old parts were stored. The light flickered. One chair. I pulled out another crate and sat across from her like we were equals and strangers at the same time. "I meant what I said," she began. "About distance." "I know. And I also meant it when I said I noticed you." She stopped, rubbed her thumb against her ring finger. "Bare skin. No ring. Both things can be true. That's what I've been avoiding." I listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix the sentence for her. "I don't want to make you responsible for my past," she said. "Or my loneliness. Or my mistakes." "I don't feel responsible," I replied. "I feel present." That surprised her. I could tell by the way her shoulders dropped, just a fraction. She looked at me then, really looked. "I don't know what this becomes," she said. "And I can't promise it won't hurt." I'm not asking for promises. Silence settled. Comfortable this time. Earned. She reached out and adjusted the collar of my shirt the same way she'd fixed my badge that first day. Slower now. Like she was aware of the choice. Her fingers lingered. Mine didn't chase them. Just stayed close enough to acknowledge the space. "I don't want to pretend anymore," she said. "But I also don't want to rush into meaning." "We don't have to name it," I said. Her forehead rested briefly against my shoulder. No kiss. No drama. Just wait. Just warmth. I stayed still so she could decide when to move. After a moment, she pulled back. Her eyes were calm. Clear. "This changes things," she said. "Yes." Not immediately. No, she stood, offered her hand without looking at it. I took it. Her grip was firm. Real. When she left, she didn't apologize. She didn't look back. And for the first time, neither did I. Because whatever this was, it wasn't borrowed from the past anymore. It was happening. Quietly. And that was enough. I'm telling this from a place that's quieter now. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Just settled in a way I didn't know how to recognize before. People like to ask what happened after. They want milestones. Labels. A clean explanation they can hold without discomfort. The truth is less impressive and more honest. Things slowed down, and somehow that's when they became real. We didn't announce anything. We didn't owe anyone clarity. Work stayed work. Boundaries stayed visible. But there were mornings when she waited an extra minute before leaving her office, and evenings when I didn't rush to close up because I knew she might come down, not for help, not for excuses, just to stand there and breathe in a space where she didn't have to perform. She stopped apologizing for being tired. That was the first change I noticed. I stopped mistaking intensity for importance. That was mine. Sometimes we talked. About small things. A book she never finished. A city I wanted to see. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Silence stopped feeling like a test. It became something shared instead of something to survive. There were days when she pulled back again. Old instincts don't disappear just because they're understood. When that happened, I didn't chase. I didn't punish her with distance either. I stayed where I was. That seemed to matter. Once, much later, she told me she'd spent years believing love was something that demanded explanation, justification, risk assessment. With me, she said, it felt more like recognition. Like remembering something she'd forgotten she was allowed to want. I didn't respond right away. I was learning that not every truth needs a reply. What changed in me was quieter. I stopped needing certainty to stay. I learned that care doesn't always arrive loudly. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not rush someone through their fear just to ease your own longing. We still don't use big words. We don't promise endings. We sit close. Our hands find each other without urgency. When she leans her head against my shoulder now, it's not because she's collapsing, it's because she's resting. And I've realized something else too. Love, the real kind, doesn't announce itself when it arrives. It shows up in who you become when no one is watching. In how gently you handle someone else's history. In how you stay without trying to own the future. That first sentence she ever said to me still echoes sometimes. Not as shock. Not as temptation. As a reminder of how strange beginnings can be when they're honest. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?